Are you ready for eternity? We want you to be well prepared for the life that is to come. But the preparation must be done in advance. In any sport, in any major project, you prepare for what you want your outcome to be. That's why today we want to talk to you about being prepared for eternity. We're going to look at Luke 19 and see how the good Dr. Luke wanted to tell us how to be ready for forever right now as we prepare for eternity as part of our series, The Eternal Perspective. Come on, join me. Let's get into God's Word. Let's dig it out and see what it has to say to you, me, us, for our eternal lives to come. Jesus Christ speaks to why having a future perspective, an eternal perspective, is absolutely critical for your earthly life now. And one of the ways he would teach us about this is through a story that the Bible, the New Testament, the Gospels call parables. Parables are stories that the Lord crafted to teach a vital spiritual principle. So when God wanted to drive something home, he'd do a story. And the goal of the story was to zero in on the principle of the story. And so we're told in verse 11 that the disciples thought that the kingdom was going to come right then. They've been waiting for the king, and they thought since Jesus was now here, the kingdom was going to come. But as you saw, the enemies did not want him to rule over them. He was rejected. And because it was rejected, that created a delay in the kingdom that God was to establish on earth through Jesus Christ. So Jesus wanted to explain to his disciples, both then and now, both there and here, how they were to function during this interim period between the king leaving and the king returning. During this time of rejection, he wanted to teach them how to live now in light of his return. Since he has not yet returned, we are in this period of time between his first coming and his second coming. And so the story, the parable, applies to you and me. In Matthew 25, verses 14 and following, Jesus tells a similar story, but with a different twist. Because in Matthew 25, when he tells the story, everybody got something different. They didn't get the same amount as in this story. So let me explain. He leaves each of them 10 minutes, and he uses the money to talk about something bigger than money. He uses minutes, but he's talking about something bigger. He's talking about life. All of us have three of the same things. Everybody here has three of the very same things. What we don't have is what he talks about in Matthew 25, the same amount of the same things. We all have the same things, but we don't have it to the same degree. The first thing that all of us have is time. Now, we don't have the same amount of time. We're not all going to live to the same age, but we all have time because we're alive. With time from a kingdom point of view, because the nobleman went away to get a kingdom, the time in the kingdom perspective is a boundary in which opportunities exist. So within this thing called tick-tock, tick-tock, time is opportunity because you use your time to do things, to accomplish things. The second thing all of us have are talents. We have varying abilities. We don't have the same talents, but we've all been given capacity to do things for the king and for his kingdom, since the parable is about the king going to get a kingdom.
We don't all have the same abilities. We don't all do the same thing, but we all have some capacity to serve the King and the kingdom. The third thing that all of us have are varying degrees of treasures, resources. Everybody doesn't make the same thing. Everybody doesn't have the same amount, but we all have some level of resource. So when he speaks about giving them all the same thing, he's talking about the life he is entrusting to them, used by the illustration, that they are to do business with till he comes. I'm going to entrust you with life, physical life, but then if you're saved, spiritual life. And during this time, between your conversion and your trip to heaven, you are to be a businessman or woman. And he says, do business till I come. He's talking about kingdom business because the master went to get a kingdom. So the king entrusts time, talents, and treasures, life, represented by the minas, in order for you to do business till I come. Now, please don't miss this. You are supposed to do the business. See, a lot of us are asking God to do business that he's waiting on us to get done. Any time in history that he wants to use means he must borrow that time from you. Any talent in history that God wants to use means he must borrow that talent from you. Any treasure that he wants to use in history, he must borrow that treasure from you. That's why all through the Bible, he must find a person, pick a person, and use a person, because he's entrusted with a person the minas, the time, the talents, and the treasures for what he wants to get done in his absence until he comes back, and he is banking on you because of what he left behind to you. Time, talents, and treasures. Not the same amount, but the same categories in varying degrees. He says you are to do business until the nobleman in the story, the king, returns. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9 puts it this way. 8 through 10 puts it this way. Verse 8 and 9 says, by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that any man should boast. That's 8 and 9. But verse 10 says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which he hath created beforehand that we might walk in them. So verse 8 and 9, he says, you're saved for free by grace. But in verse 10, he says, even though you're saved for free by grace, once you're saved for work. You're saved to accomplish something for God. He calls it good works. Good works are things you do for God's glory to advance God's kingdom that benefits others in God's name. Things done for God's glory to advance God's kingdom that benefits others in God's name. Matthew 5:16. Let men see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. So God did not save you and leave you here with a certain amount of time, talents, and treasures to forget him. In fact, he left you here, and the reason he didn't take you to heaven the moment you were saved is because there was a work he expected you to do, and he calls that work business. You and I are stewards of what we have been left with while we live here since salvation. And the job of a steward is to protect and expand the assets of another. The job of a steward is to protect and expand the assets of another. And so God is expecting that your life, time, talents, and treasures will protect and expand his kingdom purposes. That's what he's expecting. And so he's left some stuff behind, time, talents, and treasures, with which you are to pull that off. You are to accomplish that with those three areas, those minas of your life. So what happens? He's been rejected in verse 14, and therefore he's absent right now. But verse 15 says, when he returned. Oh, he did come back in the story. He hasn't come back yet in our history, but he come back in the story after receiving the kingdom. The kingdom up there is turned over to Christ by the Father for him to institute down here. We call it the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. He ordered, strong word, he made them. He ordered that these slaves to whom he had given the money be called to him so that he might know what business they had done. This is called accountability. The nobleman, Jesus, returns, and all of those who are his followers are called to him. And his question is, what did you do with the time, the talents, and the treasures that I left you with during my absence, that I told you to do business for me while I'm gone? The question on that day is not what did you do for you. The question on that day is what did you do, as you'll see in a moment, with what was mine on loan to you. While the king is gone, he has left everyone in this room who has accepted Jesus Christ a remaining amount of time, spiritually endowed talent, and a certain amount of resources, but all the same category. And he says, do business. And then he returned and he wanted to know, what kind of business did you do? This is called in 1 Corinthians 3, the judgment seat of Christ, when he will evaluate what kind of business did you do for me and the advancement of my kingdom that benefited others, for which I got the glory. The first appeared, saying, Master, your mina has made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in a very little thing, you are going to be an authority over 10 cities. Ooh, ooh. When the master, the king, came back, he called the first guy. He said, now I gave you 10 minas, show me what you got. He says, Master, you gave me 10 and I made 10 more. In other words, Master, there's 100% return. I'm not just giving you back what you gave. I'm doubling what you gave me. And here's 10 more. I expanded what you gave me. The response of the master was accolades. Well done, my good and faithful servant. I am going to put you over 10 cities. Please notice something. The reward was consistent with the expansion. I gave you, you got 10 minutes. You made 10. I'm going to give you 10 cities. And I'm going to give you 10 cities based on the expansion of what I originally gave you. I gave you time and you expanded it for me. I gave you talent, you expanded it for me. I gave you treasures, you expanded it for me. And I'm going to reflect that, and I'm going to give you 10 cities. Now, heaven is not playing a harp for a zillion years. Heaven is participating in God's rule. and being given responsibilities commensurate with your investment of your life during this interim period. We're told next that the second guy comes. And the second guy says, Master, your mina, master, has made 5 minas. I had 50% increase. You got 5. I didn't get 10 like the first guy. I got 5. The master says, you are over 5 cities. Notice what he didn't say. Well done. He only said well done to the first guy because the first guy maximized the opportunities. Second guy was half-stepping. He doesn't get a well done. In other words, he could have done more, but he didn't. He was 50% there. And so he did not get accolades. It's like a person at work who goes over and above and the person at work who just does the basics. But he does get recognition in terms of a reward. He gets 5 cities, note, that is commensurate with his action. Now, please note thus far, stay with me here, that there is accountability to what was left them. In other words, and the reason why there was accountability is it wasn't their minas. They're servants and slaves. They belong to the master. See, the moment you lose sight that your time belongs to the master, the moment you lose sight that your talents belong to the master, the moment that you lose sight that your treasures belong to the master, you're not going to have anything to show because you're going to use it all for you. Because you become the master. And so, he comes and he holds account these 2. But then we're introduced to homeboy number 3. Another came saying, Master. Oh, now he talking right. I mean, he talking right. He's talking like a committed follower. He says masters. Like folk in church hollering out Jesus. You sound good. Master. His terminology was accurate. Here is your mina. Here's what you left me, which I kept put away in a handkerchief because I was scared. He says, I was afraid because you are an exacting man. You take what you did not lay down and you reap what you did not sow. In other words, you're hard to please. In other words, you have high expectations. In other words, your demands are not minimal. You expect significant involvement and investment. Master, you too serious. You too serious. And I didn't want to risk losing your mina. And so because I didn't want to risk losing it, I did actually nothing with it. Because it was too risky knowing how tough a guy you are. So let's look at this third guy. He's a servant. And he's got the right terminology, but he did nothing with the time, the talents, and the treasures except give back what he got. That's all he did. He gave back what he got. He said, here's your mina in a handkerchief. In other words, I'm not going to do anything with it. I was just concerned about not losing it. I was playing defense. I was concerned about not losing it. He said to him in verse 22, by your own words I will judge you, you worthless slave. Do you know that I am an exacting man? Did you know that I'm an exacting man, taking up what I did not lay down, reaping where I did not sow? Then why did you not put my money in the bank? At least I would have collected some interest. You worthless slave. Your theology has not affected your activity. And that has made you valueless to my kingdom. You are of no value to me. I left you here with a certain amount of time. I left you here with a certain amount of treasure. I left you here with a certain amount of talent. I left you here for my kingdom. I come back and you just talking about, I came to church. The theology did not affect you. Hasn't affected you at all, because when you leave, you still call me master. But I still don't get any of your time. I still don't get any use of your talent. I still get minimal use of your treasure. So you got the right theology and you are a worthless Christian. Are there any worthless Christians in the house? You got the Christian terminology. You call him Jesus Master. The Bible speaks about 100-fold repayment. So those of you who are here today, and you're living the best Christian life you know how, you're giving your time, your talents, and your treasures for God's kingdom, and it's not been fair to you. It's not been right by you. Guess what God says? I think it's in Matthew chapter 5, around verse 11. He says, when you're having to pay a price for doing right, notice what he says. He says, rejoice. Wait a minute. How am I going to rejoice when I'm not being treated right? He says, because your reward is rich. He gives us some things now, but he's talking about the big payday. He says, you worthless slave. You wouldn't even go to a bank. Now, why wouldn't he at least put it in the bank? Because the bank keeps records. So when you deposit in the bank, there's a record. He puts it in a handkerchief because he does not want a record. He does not want a record of where this minna is. Why not? In case the king doesn't come back, I still got my minna. I still got my time. I still got my talent. I can live my life the way I want to live it. He says, you worthless slave. So what are we going to do with him, Lord? He says in verse 24, tell the bystanders to take the minas away from him and give it to the one who has the 10 minas. Tell the bystanders. So this is everybody watching your conversation with Jesus. This is all the other Christian friends that you knew who looking at your evaluation and your accountability and watching Jesus call you worthless. And then take his minas and give it. Let's give a bonus to the one who did 10. We're going to give them a bonus. See, because there are a few people here who not only going to get the 10 minutes, they're going to get the bonus. And the bonus will be God taken from you and given to them so that you wind up in heaven with less. You don't even wind up with what you started with, because he's going to take that minna that you used for nothing and hand it to somebody who went all out for the kingdom and for eternity. What's the principle? What's the principle? He gives the principle in verse. The people say, but master, the guy already has 10. He says, well, let me tell you the principle. I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given, but from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. You don't get credit just for being a servant. You're saved by grace. You don't get credit for that. That's all of God. So you don't get credit for being a Christian. You get credit for serving the master and using the time and the talents and the treasures that he has entrusted to you for his glory, to advance his kingdom, for the benefit of others, to his glory. That's what he credits. I don't like squash. But suppose you told me, Evans, I want to make a deal with you. Say, okay, what's the deal? I know you don't like squash, but I tell you what, if you will eat squash for a year for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, for a year for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 3 meals a day of squash, I will pay all your bills for the rest of your life. My view of squash has greatly changed. My view, I'll never look at squash the way I used to look at it again. Because the reward for the inconvenience is so much bigger. The reward for the inconvenience is so much greater. What God says, if I can get you to see the eternal perspective, the reward for the inconvenience is going to be so much greater if you live this life with that life in mind.
Well, the whole series, The Eternal Perspective, all 10 messages, they're yours for a gift of any amount given to the ministry of the Urban Alternative. We need your help. We need your generous support, along with your prayers. Your support with your prayers will help us get the word out, and we want to get the word out to as many people as possible. So if you're blessed by this ministry, would you allow it to continue to be a blessing to you and a blessing to others? 10 messages, The Eternal Perspective, they're yours. Contact us, 1-800-800-3222, or log on to tonyevans.org. That's 1-800-800-3222, or log on to tonyevans.org. Thank you for your support. We need your help. We appreciate your support, and we want to keep the word coming your way. God bless you. Thank you.